everybody, and welcome. This is the first ever Consumer Choice Center Menthol Melee. Thank you guys so much for joining. We got some great comments, some great testimonies coming from all sorts of people who are going to weigh in on some alternatives to the Food and Drug Administration's proposed bans on flavored cigars and menthol cigarettes. So I'm Yael Osowski, Deputy Director here at the Consumer Choice Center. We're a consumer advocacy group. We're active on all things lifestyle regulation and lifestyle freedom, all things smart policy, and all things technological innovation. And when we look at what's happening with the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA's proposed rules are the farthest things from technological innovation. They're the farthest things from lifestyle freedom and the farthest things from smart policies. That's why we're very, very passionate about this topic and many others, and why we wanted to give a place, a platform for others who perhaps were not heard by the FDA when they were crafting these rules, who have not been heard by the FDA throughout their entire rulemaking process. Government is messy, government is complicated, but that's why groups like ours exist, to give an alternative, to give another voice to those who will be impacted by this regulation, what it means for them and for their communities. So without further ado, we're going to give it up to our first testimony that we'll hear. This is on menthol cigarettes, it's on flavored cigars, and on an alternative for the Food and Drug Administration to consider. So throughout the Menthol Melee, we're going to hear from community organizers, we're going to hear from former law enforcement, we're going to hear from think tank professionals and researchers who've looked into this ban, or proposed ban, and want to provide an alternative. And the first voice we're going to hear from is someone that might be very familiar to you if you understand a lot about what's happened with police brutality in recent years, if you understand the impact of many of these regulations that are imposed on our communities. We're going to hear from Gwen Carr, the mother of Eric Garner.
Hello, my name is Gwen Carr. I am the mother of Eric Garner. I urge you to oppose the FDA ban on menthol cigarettes, the cigarettes preferred by over 80% of African Americans who choose to smoke. I do not encourage, support, or promote smoking. Banning menthol cigarettes will open the floodgates for smuggling illegal menthol cigarettes into Black neighborhoods already plagued with illegal drugs. When you ban the product sold mostly in Black communities, but you do not have the same ban in other communities, you invite those police officers into our communities. My family knows all too well what can happen when police enforce tobacco control laws. I work with other Black mothers of those who have fallen victim to violence, and in some cases, lethal encounters with the police, to raise serious concerns about the full impact of the FDA menthol ban in Black neighborhoods. We all know the law enforcement is different in communities of color. Black people have already paid too high a price for discriminatory laws. I urge you to oppose the FDA menthol ban. Let's work together to improve interactions with police and make our communities safer for all, and the police of goodwill. The unfiltered and the unflavored cigarettes are just as addictive and harmful and kills just as many people, but the FDA don't seem to be treading in those waters. Just another form of discrimination in the communities of color. Why not ban all cigarettes? It is the nicotine that is killing the smokers, which is in all cigarettes.
Very touching tribute indeed from Ms. Carr. I hope she continues well in her fight for justice as she continues to advocate both in New York and throughout the entire country. So next we're going to hear from a good slew of former law enforcement officers who understand full well what these proposed bans would mean and what they would mean for law enforcement, what they would mean for you and your individual rights, and how much it will actually cost our communities, our individuals, and all of our choices as consumers.
My name is Elliot Boyce. I'm a trooper. I've been in law enforcement for over 35 years. During my time in law enforcement, I served on several local, state, and federal gun and drug task force for the purpose of controlling the illicit market of contraband around the state. I'm not a smoker. I'm not an advocate for smoking, and I highly suggest young adults choose a healthier lifestyle that does not include smoking. However, with that being said, I am adamantly against the FDA's ban on menthol cigarettes and all flavored cigars. Though well-intended, the unintended consequences far outweigh what will be a protection for those who smoke. Understanding that those who smoke choose to smoke. Grown adults over the age of 21 that choose to smoke. I consistently keep hearing that big tobacco is targeting young adults, but we know the Master Settlement Agreement in 1998 basically squashed that. So young adults under the age of 20 have never seen an advertisement, a movie, a rapper, a sports figure highlighted in a cigarette commercial because they don't exist. Point of sales for cigarettes only. What point of sale is advertisement is at the point of the location or at the location in which cigarettes are being sold. So we take that one off the table. When we start talking about the ban is only going to be on the ban on manufacturers, I understand that, but it's a ban on manufacturers with a caveat. I believe the FDA said they do not believe that a ban on menthol cigarettes will have any impact on the illicit market. We can't afford for you not to believe. We need it to be factual. Thus meaning you need to do an impact study that has law enforcement input to show them exactly what's going on around the country in their communities, their urban centers in which the illicit market of cigarettes are currently being sold. So we could have the facts, not we don't believe. A ban or prohibition on cigarettes is going to increase the interactions between law enforcement and law-abiding citizens who choose to smoke cigarettes. See, law-abiding citizens will go to their corner store, their grocery, or their market and buy their cigarettes, buy their groceries, and then go home and choose to smoke their cigarettes. When you ban them, you're going to make it contraband. Contraband is going to be the same as any other drug or any other illicit market. Law enforcement officers will basically enforce them in the same manner. That means handcuffs, search warrants, and individuals in urban centers, because over 85% of the individuals that smoke menthol cigarettes, African American and Latino, are going to be forced to interact with law enforcement officers. This ban is hazardous to the African American community. And please understand, a drug transaction and a cigarette transaction on the street look the same. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anthony Carothers. I'm a retired Chicago police commander. I worked in Chicago for 28 years and 4 years with the Cook County Sheriff's Department. So all my adult life, I dealt with law enforcement. I served in many units, including tactical units, including task forces, detective division, and more. And it caused me to have a lot of interaction with the people. Some negative, but some very positive. I'm here to address this question about menthol bans within cigarettes, and I don't agree, I don't support it, because I think that you're going to create a larger call from police to respond to issues. I know that FDA has said, well, we're not going to target the people selling or the people buying. Now, that doesn't matter what your plan is. You see, once you pass a law, people will call police. And if you complain about them calling, they'll say, well, you shouldn't have passed the law. I'm dealing with people on a very common street level. And it makes a lot of sense. I'm telling you that when you have bans, you create more criminal activity. As of right now, we have trucks who will go from one state where you can buy, say, a carton of cigarettes for $100, but then go to a state where you might be able to buy it for $70. Now you add that into 20 cigarettes in a pack. You're talking about 20 packs in a carton. We're talking about cartons in the cases. So we're talking about someone who can cross the border with a truck, literally buy, I don't know, $100,000 worth of cigarettes, and you could end up selling them for $200,000 to $300,000 on the street. The whole idea of you can't legislate your way out of everything. If you really want to create change in something, you have to change the way people think about an issue. You've already had great decreases in smoking because of the way people think about it now, and the way people have actually shamed people about it. Also, when looking at me, obviously, they said, well, this affects the Black community 85%. Well, the problem with that theory is in all the meetings I've had with the community, I've had meetings as commander, I've had block club meetings, I've had people with meetings set up by the aldermen and by state representatives and the clergy. In all my time in Inglewood, people would approach me in meetings or in the street. Commander, we need grocery stores. We need housing. And that would be low income, not affordable housing. There's a difference. Commander, we need better schools. Commander, we need health care. We need mental health care. All true. But in all my life, in 30 years of law enforcement, 60 years of living, I've never had a Black man, woman, or child ever approach me and say, you know what? We got to get this menthol out of cigarettes. So, with all due respect, that's doctors and scientists. And I'm not saying you're incorrect or dishonest. I'm simply telling you, it's also insulting when you tell Black people what they need. If everybody involved would not do that, ask Black people what they need. They'll tell you. Just give them the courtesy. Don't assume what they need. Don't tell them, because most of the time it's going to get pushed back. Not to mention, the last thing I'm going to bring on is I've talked about law enforcement, but then there's an economic part. You have a product that the city, county, states receive large amounts of revenue from. So you receive maybe 50 million more per year. So you take this item and then you ban it. So where are you going to make up that money at? We're going to make up that 50 million or 100 million or whatever it is. Normally, they go after the low-hanging fruit, which is property tax. See, because the government is not going to just lose money and say, oh, well, we don't need it. No, you're going to make it up some way or another. I have so many other issues regarding this whole concept about this ban, but I only have a few minutes. So hopefully there'll be some discussion, much further discussion in the near future. But at this point in time, based on what I'm told and read, and I've done a lot of it, this is not the right direction to go. There are other answers that we can help. That's not the one. Thank you so much.
Good morning. My name is Rich Marianos. I'm the retired assistant director for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Currently, I'm a professor at Georgetown University and also a member of the Police Executive Research Forum and the International Association of Chiefs of Police. What I'd like to discuss briefly is the FDA's ban or proposed ban on flavored products to include menthol. In my 30 years of law enforcement experience, this is one of the most ludicrous ideas that I've seen in a long, long time. I don't think the administration nor the FDA has put any thought into it, specifically by trying to work with subject matter experts to look at the ramifications or the consequences of this policy and realize the quality of life issues that the community is going to suffer due to the fact that it was never plugged in with the right people to help make the decisions. First point I'd like to make is it's going to create crime. It's going to create a situation where there's going to be an illicit market, a black market out there with people selling counterfeit cigarettes, cigarettes from other jurisdictions, cigarettes that are self-mentholated or dangerous products that can cause a greater issue to those who choose to continue to smoke. Second, what I want to discuss that's important is the negative effects towards police reform. We've worked so hard since 2020 to try to get our cops, along with our citizens, to work together in concert with one another to try to solve problems. It's very evident to me that the police responsibility is to serve and protect, not regulate and harass. By putting this into the play, the FDA will not be involved in the day-to-day operations. They will delegate to local police departments who will be the face of this ridiculous, silly initiative. With the harassment complaints that will develop tenfold, the likelihood of having citizens working with police on serious crime after they've been arrested, harassed, over cigarette violations, see for yourself. It just doesn't happen. You can't push back to a community and expect them to work with you. And when is the last time any of us have seen an FDA agent, officer, or member out there after dark trying to police, work with, or try to affect any change within the community? In 30 years, I haven't. If you do, please, share your thoughts. Finally, the loss of revenue, the billions and billions of dollars in federal tax revenue that is going to be lost by removing the sale of these products, flavor products, menthol products in commerce. Right now, we have families paying $7 a gallon for gasoline. We have people paying $9 for a jar of mayonnaise. The economic crisis is as bad or worse than it was in 1981. Crime is at its highest point than it's ever been before. We have more important things to worry about, to include the fentanyl crisis. If FDA wants to worry about something, start looking at the baby formula issue. That's far more important and far more pertinent than a flavor ban or a menthol ban. Finally, I want to conclude with, it's important for us to realize that right now, law enforcement needs to work on crime, not harassment. And in every situation, this is a bad idea where it's going to cause more problems than good. I thank everyone for their time, and I look forward to the public engaging in an effort to push back on a bad idea and striving for better ideas to come out of the 202 area code, rather than something as silly and ridiculous that continues to push back on our intelligence and make us feel stupid when we're smarter than this. Thank you.
My name is James Newman, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to contribute my video to this effort. I'm a retired federal agent from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives with many years of conducting illicit tobacco investigations. While I understand the health concerns surrounding the proposed policy, the broader law enforcement community needs to be engaged before you reach a final decision. This ban will do little to stop the usage of menthol tobacco products. They will continue to be imported and manufactured through dangerous illegal channels, and this will enable an influx of organized crime and illicit smuggling into communities across the country. While conducting illicit tobacco investigations, I have personally witnessed that tobacco products are just as valuable and sometimes more valuable than currency when they are traded for cocaine, heroin, marijuana, and firearms. I've even seen illicit tobacco products exchanged for motor vehicles. In a time when law enforcement agencies nationwide are looking for ways to develop stronger relationships with the communities that they serve, and most law enforcement resources are stretched thin, I think we need to be concerned about how this ban will affect the relationships between the police and their communities. Street corner loose menthol cigarette sales that look very similar to a drug transaction to a police officer will surge across the country. This puts the police in a precarious position. Did that officer just observe a cigarette sale or a drug transaction? If a concerned citizen observes similar transactions occurring in their neighborhood and notifies law enforcement, did they observe a cigarette sale or a drug transaction? And unfortunately, this ban could cause this scenario to play out in our Black and brown communities more than any other community. I would hope that the FDA considers bringing a broader group of law enforcement professionals to the table so that a strong law enforcement strategy can be part of the plan moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, so while this is not about the economy, you got to admit the economy is in the tank. Moreover, minorities are going to be the primary victims of this so-called flavor ban, this menthol ban, which, by the way, people have been smoking menthol cigarettes for who knows how long. All of a sudden, it's, makes them public enemy number one because they want to smoke a menthol cigarette. The argument about kids primarily smoking, or that's what they start smoking, is not a fact. Unfortunately, FDA doesn't have to prove what they say, like people who try to get things approved does. They just say something and it makes it real. FDA openly admits that they're not going to get involved in the enforcement side at the street level, which is where the majority of enforcement is going to take place. The police currently, they're already struggling due to the ingenious defund the police movement. And now that you're going to add flavored cigarettes to the list of things that you're going to have to deal with on the street. That's really going to help them solve crime when they're out here hassling people over a menthol cigarette. And then a couple of days later, they have to talk to those same people about what they may have witnessed in a violent crime. It just doesn't make sense. It's a federal issue. FDA is a federal agency. They have their own federal law enforcement officers within the FDA. And so, as typical, it's going to be an unfunded mandate that state and local law enforcement has to deal with because the feds are too busy, or it's not important enough for them to have to deal with it. So they're going to put it on the backs of state and local cops that already have their own trouble to deal with. So I really don't think it's going to happen very well on the street. The enforcement's not going to happen well. The illicit cigarette market will explode. There's already tons of counterfeits and illicit cigarettes on the street. This is just going to make it worse. Which, oh, by the way, illicit cigarettes is one of them, or probably the major funding source for organized crime, as well as terrorist organizations. And you can look that up. It's true. This is an incredibly dumb idea, and the timing, in my opinion, could not possibly be worse, but go figure.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The concerns that I have are that the FDA proposals are being considered without the input of a significant stakeholder, that being the law enforcement community. Addressing the health concerns by FDA are valid, but in this area, law enforcement needs a voice to ensure that implementation doesn't create an enormous revenue stream for organized crime groups and indirectly terrorist entities. In 2015, then President Obama's U.S. State Department issued a report that stated that illicit tobacco was a national security threat. So how can the FDA propose these significant changes to the tobacco regulations without engaging the law enforcement community to understand the repercussions of these new regulations? Presently, there is no one federal agency that has a comprehensive strategy to combat illicit tobacco activity, leaving it to state and local law enforcement to combat this significant threat. As the former deputy director of ATF and former sheriff of New York City, I have seen firsthand the challenges when there is no unified strategy. These proposals without law enforcement input will only exacerbate the situation for law enforcement. Illicit tobacco trafficking is part of the underground economy. That is a reality. The proposal is creating a perfect storm for organized crime groups to further entrench themselves in the illicit tobacco industry. While the regulated industry will adhere to the new regulations, the reality is that organized crime groups will saturate the market with illegitimate and unregulated tobacco product. Without a viable law enforcement strategy, the public will be harmed. Thank you.
My name is Ronald Hampton, and I'm with the Black Police Association of America. I'm not in favor of the ban, nor is our organization. As a matter of fact, we find that the ban is very similar to the June the 18th, 1971 initial war on drugs, where supposedly this action was designed to protect the Black community from illegal drugs and the violence associated with it. However, what ended up happening is that the Black community was stripped of the individuals who lived there, the mothers and fathers. We saw an escalation of those individuals being arrested and incarcerated. creating the mass incarceration problem that we're still dealing with today. Additionally, we saw the resources in our community stripped and taken from our community as a result of the war on drugs. So it was not only the human damage that the war on drugs inflicted on our community, but the resources. The resources was given to law enforcement rather than invested in our community and the social issues that were going on at that particular time, whether it was health care, the schools, other services that our community needed badly. And as a result of that, we continue to see problems to that today. And the war on drugs was initiated 51 years ago. So I see the same kind of situation happening as a result of the ban on menthol cigarettes. What's going to happen, folks who utilize menthol cigarettes? The majority of smokers are African Americans and Hispanic people. And as a result of that, a couple of things are going to happen that I can think of right away. It's going to create an underground market. Black and brown people are going to be harassed. They're going to be targeted as a result of the ones who are smoking these cigarettes, and our communities will be victimized again as a result of an effort of the government to so-called protect us, rather than to allow us the same freedoms that any other community will be able to have. So it just doesn't make sense. It creates a situation where these unintended consequences are going to be, we're going to come face to face with these unintended consequences, and the community doesn't have a way of fighting back. Lastly, I would have suggested in the very beginning that there was been a conversation with law enforcement organizations about this type of policy, this kind of ban, and the impact of it, not just in terms of from the medical side, but also from the enforcement side, and so that would have been a much better way of approaching it, just based on the kinds of history and past that we have when it have come to the idea of banning something and protecting individuals in the African American community from these so-called health threats and other problems that and criminal aspects of it, the things that are happening in our community. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present this video and testimony. And again, my name is Ronald Hampton. I'm with Blacks in Law Enforcement of America. And if you have any questions regarding my statement, I'm more than willing to answer those questions and participate in the process of talking about how to do this in a way that protects our community rather than victimize our community. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Pegues, and I'm a retired executive from the New York City Police Department at NYPD. I'm a staunch critic against this menthol ban because I know that there's going to be some unintended consequences that's going to affect the Black and brown community. I live in the state of New York. In New York, 50% of cigarettes already sold are illegal. The underground, the criminal market is alive and well. And I don't want to see any other Black or brown person arrested or harassed for a cigarette. We're just coming off stop, question, and frisk, where over 800,000 Black and brown men and women were stopped, questioned, and or frisked, with only less than 2% of them being issued a summons and or an arrest. We're trying to heal wounds that's been in effect for a very long time. You know, we tried prohibition in the 20s. It don't work. The only way you can deal with an addiction, which menthol is the addiction, is treatment, counseling, and education. I can promise you, if this ban goes through, this will be the new stop and frisk. All across America, young Black and brown men and women will be harassed and stopped from police because of a cigarette. There's 3 major cases that we know involved a menthol cigarette, more importantly, a Newport cigarette. Sandra Bland refused to put out her cigarette. Eric Garner was allegedly selling Lucy cigarettes. And the most infamous case, George Floyd allegedly was trying to buy a box of Newport cigarettes with a counterfeit bill. Now, those are 3 cases we know about. And the only reason we know them is because they was on video. What about the hundreds and thousands of black and brown men and women that has been harassed because of a cigarette? They will use that cigarette as a precursor to gain information, to harass people. They'll never be arrested for the cigarette because it's not a crime, but they will use it as a precursor to stop, question, and or frisk people. And with the whole world since George Floyd talking about defund the police, reimagine the police, restructure the police, why would you place a ban on something that's going to have more engagement with the police and the black and brown community? I really hope that the FDA take a strong, hard look at this and reconsider. Please, no ban. It's the new stop and frisk. It must be stopped now. Thank you. My name is Corey Pegues. Again, I'm a retired executive from the New York City Police Department.
So now that you've heard from law enforcement, we've heard personal stories of the impact of some of the prohibition that has existed in the past and continues to exist, we're going to hear from some of our scholars, some of our policy experts who've been researching this, who understand not just the personal case, but the academic case against the FDA's proposed bans on flavored cigars and menthol cigarettes. I think you guys are going to learn a good amount. Thank you guys for continuing to tune in. Please give us a like, subscribe, give us a share, whatever it might be. We're trying to share the message and to share an alternative message to that of the FDA. Hopefully our own listening session, our own Menthol Melee can get some legs and can hopefully influence the right people in the Food and Drug Administration so that they don't take this pernicious path.
Hello everyone, and thank you for listening in. The fight against smoking-induced illnesses is an important fight, and we should do everything we can do to improve public health. But obviously the end doesn't justify all means. Measures must be based on science and the respect of individual decisions of adults. Plus, we should also learn from history, which showed us that bad regulation and prohibition most of the times have disastrous results. But unfortunately, the FDA seems to ignore all these lessons from history, ignore science and the consumers. It wants to go down the pathway of prohibition again, even though there are alternatives to reduce smoking. And it is outrageous that the FDA completely ignores harm reduction and actively fights it. Because fighting smoking but parallel depriving consumers of better alternatives such as vaping, which is way less harmful, has to have bad consequences. So every smoker who switches to vaping should be celebrated instead of being attacked. Otherwise, we see all the negative consequences of this kind of approach. A balloon black market, criminalization of consumers, and also higher smoking rates again. So exactly the opposite what the FDA claims to want to achieve. Together with millions of vapers, I therefore urge Dr. Robert Califf to start listening to us consumers, to experts and to science. Prohibition doesn't work, but vaping saves lives. I'm Michael from the World Vapers Alliance.
Hi, I'm Jeff Steyer. I'm happy to be affiliated with the Consumer Choice Center as well as the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. I've been following tobacco policy for over 20 years. I was actually personally in attendance at the FDA's Tobacco Product Scientific Advisory Committee meetings on menthol, and that was almost a decade ago. And in those meetings, the advisors, the scientific advisors, said, we're going to leave it to the FDA to figure out the unintended consequences, whether this does enough good for public health to ban menthol, or are the unintended consequences too high? The FDA has not answered that question. I've read all of the FDA's documents, and things have changed so much in the last 10 years with the popularity of e-cigarettes for adult smokers to quit. And all of that old evidence should be out the window in terms of weighing the risks and the benefits. The risks, unfortunately, in society, we have had to have a reckoning on police interactions with minority communities. I'm glad we're finally having that reckoning. And if there's one thing we can learn from it, is now is not the time to be banning menthol cigarettes. a cigarette that is disproportionately popular in the African American as well as other minority communities. So why is it that we are trying to now ban those cigarettes, especially at a point in time now when we have a less harmful alternative in menthol? All the FDA has to do is authorize a number of menthol e-cigarettes together with an educational campaign to inform menthol smokers, adults, about the lower risk. The best thing to do is to not use any nicotine product altogether. But if you do use nicotine, if you want to continue using it, if you can't quit, I believe that citizens who use menthol, adults, have the right to accurate information. And just as the FDA has been doing educational campaigns for, say, Native American teens about not vaping, I would love to see an FDA campaign to menthol smokers, targeting adult menthol smokers, and helping them now understand what we all know is that e-cigarettes are much less harmful. The FDA has already authorized a number of non-menthol e-cigarettes. We know that menthol doesn't make e-cigarettes more dangerous. The only concern is youth. And now we've got Tobacco 21. We've got laws in each state that ban the sales to minors. Now is the time to think forward, to be progressive, to put aside the unintended consequences of a ban and gain the benefits of authorizing, together with an educational campaign, lower risk alternatives. I think now's the time to do that.
My name is Dr. Pratika Kumar, and I'm a senior fellow for integrated harm reduction at Asst Institute, a nonprofit and nonpartisan public policy organization focused on advancing free markets and limited effective government. At Asst, we believe that health policy grounded in harm reduction has the potential to drastically reduce the negative consequences associated with risky behaviors, promotes compassion and personal autonomy, and reduces the economic footprint of associated healthcare costs. I would like to thank the Consumer Choice Center for hosting this event and amplifying our voices on the proposed standards. Health policy is only strong when all stakeholders are at the table. In light of the recent FDA listening sessions, I would like to highlight some of the key implications and blind spots that would be worth considering for the proposed standards on menthol. When a menthol ban on tobacco products was enacted in Massachusetts in June of 2020, it showed a decrease in the sale of tobacco products, but it also failed to analyze cross-border sales. While Massachusetts did experience a decrease in flavored tobacco sales, neighboring states of New Hampshire and Rhode Island saw an increase in sales, suggesting that consumer purchase behavior simply crossed state lines. While a ban on menthol in cigarettes will reduce the number of cigarette smokers, the vast majority, in fact 3/4 when looking at the outcomes of Canada's menthol ban, will continue smoking. The Canadian experience also suggests this population will switch to non-menthol cigarettes, obtain menthol cigarettes from illicit markets, and/or mentholize their own tobacco products. Should illicit menthol cigarettes be unavailable, heavy menthol users may turn to self-mentholation practices if regulated substitutes such as menthol or mint-flavored electronic nicotine delivery systems are also banned. Regulations that have the potential to increase the number of engagements between law enforcement and Black and Brown communities, especially during an era of acute issues involving race and policing, are in fact at odds with improving the health and welfare of those same individuals. Regardless of the FDA's intentions for supply-side enforcement mechanisms, the reality is that all 50 states treat unlicensed distribution and sale of banned tobacco products as a crime. We need to see messaging consistent with scientific real-world evidence. To conclude that menthol bans on combustible tobacco products will in fact result in improved public health in an equitable manner, we need evidence from multiple simulation studies. Research has shown that there are stark disparities in smoking cessation rates based on key social determinants of health such as income, neighborhoods, education, and race. This brings me to the final and probably the most important factor that needs to be considered prior to putting this ban into effect, and that is ensuring that all stakeholders' voices are heard and engaged with. In the recent listening sessions held by the FDA last week, it was clear that key stakeholder groups such as members of law enforcement, minority smokers, smokers who have been previously incarcerated, minority tobacco farmers, to name a few, felt that they were not included in the proposal development process. And they spoke about their confusion, and in fact, some even talked about serious concerns on potential implications of this ban. Prohibition is not harm reduction, and bans are blunt instruments that result in various amounts of collateral damage. While we don't think anyone should be smoking cigarettes, we do need a harm reduction approach to help smokers who cannot or will not abstain from using these products. Simply telling them no will not yield its intended effect. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Menthol Melee. Hope you can continue following us at the Consumer Choice Center. We heard a great number of testimonies. We heard some actually better ideas about how the Food and Drug Administration could tackle the crisis of smoking. But we heard realistically from the people that this will impact, both in law enforcement, individual community organizers, and a lot of experts who understand the policies and the harm that would come to many communities. So we hope we've provided an alternative to the Food and Drug Administration's proposed bans. We hope that they continue listening to the people going forward, not just those who are in the administration, but those who would be impacted by this and who know the real cost. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Continue following along with Consumer Choice Center. We're there to fight for you, lifestyle freedom, innovative tech, and everything smart policies. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Menthol Melee. Stick around. We'll have plenty more content for you. There's plenty of other interests where the government is getting involved, and hopefully we're there to speak for you. So thank you guys so much. Until next time.